Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. This is Franz, Sidney, and I'm very excited to have you today to talk with me and with Hope Rose, all the way from the Rocky Mountain regions, about self-shame and the weight of self-judgment. So first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Me too, and we hope to give hope because that's what people need. If you look around from early childhood to teenagers, even older people, we might all suffer from a form of shame. And I know you have an extensive list of how shame can be in our life. We don't really realize it's there. And how do we judge ourselves so harshly? But we don't do that with the best friends, do we? So let's talk about the shame. What do you know about the shame and the self-judgment?
So the topic of shame, I know so much about it, unfortunately, is because I have a very intimate relationship with shame. And it wasn't even something I have been conscious of until maybe the last couple of years, because shame was so ingrained like in my DNA. I always kind of joke like shame is like a blood type. I want to let you know you can change your blood type. You're not blood type shame. The first distinction I want to bring to our listeners is from Brene Brown, the difference between shame and guilt. Shame is I am bad. And guilt is I did something bad. Two distinct things. And people can use guilt and shame interchangeably. And that's really misaligned because when we're focused on healing whatever it is that we want to heal, we need to make sure we're healing the actual thing, calling shame for what it is and guilt for what it is. And I bet our listeners probably struggle with shame and maybe they have been misidentifying. And it's like, oh, I have been doing these different behaviors and it's really shame. And shame can show up in so many different ways, from being a self-pleaser to being like a seductive shame. It's very alluring. Like you get almost a high off of these negative, quote unquote, negative patterns in your life because you're so used to them. And it can show up as, being manipulative, or if you're not chosen, you get a high out of that. It validates your misaligned script that you have. See, they didn't choose me, and so therefore I must be bad. And so it's really working through these very deep layers of shame. And it can, really infiltrate all areas of your life until you actually kind of take like that magnifying glass. You're like, oh, I didn't even realize that was shame. And shame is showing up in this regard. And so I would like to offer, our listeners that you can change shame for the better. Shame doesn't have to rule your life. And you're not blood type shame. You're not blood type bad. And you're also not those voices that say in your head, I'm bad, I'm worthless, I'm too broken, I'm too damaged, nobody's ever going to choose me. And that instead we can flip it to an opportunity of like, where am I abandoning myself? And these voices come from typically our caregivers. They can come through our generational trauma. If a person hasn't risen up in our lineage and said, oh, we're going to stop this cycle of, abuse. We're going to stop this cycle of shame. And so if this topic resonates with you, congratulations. You and myself are on this journey of, being the generational cycle breakers of this particular thing, or maybe it's something else that you're working on.
So we're not born bad. We're not born to judge ourselves. I mean, if you think about this little baby sitting there in his own wet nappy and is looking around and is quite overweight for standards that we have now. He's quite chubby. He's got lots of rolls of fat. He doesn't have hardly any hair, no makeup, no nice clothes, and he's looking like, I love myself. He loves it, a little chubby baby boy or baby girl, when they're full of self-confidence. They come to you, look, mommy, what I've done, like a scribble. And then as we grow up, we start comparing what we see with what we have achieved or whatever. And we start thinking, oh, that is not really good enough. And to a point, it helps us to improve because we want to get better. But there's a point when we are so critical of ourselves, maybe we end up actually criticizing others because we are not happy with ourselves. We have very high standard. We think we're not going to be loved. Isn't that maybe even more expansive and more spread than I thought. So a lot of people who seem to be just perfectionistic, they're actually thinking that it's shameful not to be perfect. That's expanding our audience by a few millions because maybe the big CEO, Steve Jobs, I don't know, somebody very big like him, maybe they were suffering from that. Isn't that quite an interesting point of view? But they made it.
It's very interesting, and just how deep does this run in my life and another person's life, of they can be super successful, but maybe it's their
Mm.
relationships, because what it's typically these things just don't show up in one area of our life. It shows up in all areas. And so when you start to become aware and conscious of where these things are like showing up, of like, oh, I didn't, okay, let's take this for example. I didn't make my bed this morning. Oh my gosh, I'm a bad person. And you might not even be thinking of that, but where else is that showing up
Mm.
in your life? And so, if a person is very rigid, this really does, if people have grown up in a very like religious home, religious is very black and white, and that's shame can really thrive in that environment. And so, yeah, it could be perfectionist, it could be the martyr, woe is me, nothing ever goes right, and getting sympathy versus empathy are also two very, very different things. Getting a high from other people of like, oh, my life is like, I'm sure you have a friend, or you can see people of like their life is always falling apart. And that is a really good invitation to like, oh, am I really enjoying my life falling apart? Like really like sit down with that and have the consciousness and the awareness of like, I think I might get a high off of that. There's a really good book by Carolyn Elliott called Existential Kink. Highly recommend it. And it's like this kink for you get off on this pain, on this like pleasure almost. And it's the pleasure of like, life is never going my way. And then other people come in, I'm so sorry. How could you go through this? Like, even like giving them accolades, you're so strong, you're so brave. And it's feeding into that shame. It's like, and that's like the seductive shame piece of what
Mhm.
kind of what I call it. It's very seductive of like, I can't meet my needs internally. And so I need someone else to validate that I am worthy of love. Maybe it's here's the situation. Personal. A couple of years ago, I was sitting with something, and once again, I had to like quote unquote be rescued. It was a bad situation. Uh, I don't want to go into too many details of it, but it was not a pleasant situation. And once again, somebody kind of, like bailed me out. We found housing, we got everything, fixed together. And I was sitting there and I was kind of doing this deep healing work. And I was like, you know what? I, I get a high off of being rescued, of being in like this almost like damsel in distress.
Mm.
Like when I'm in distress, it is proving like I put myself, and this is all very unconscious. It's not like I'm going to intentionally put myself in a situation that I need to be, quote
Mhm.
unquote, rescued from. It's not like a, burning building, but it was. My life was burning up. And so until like, this is what Carl Jung says, conscious, until you make the unconscious conscious, you will call it fate. Paraphrasing that. And so I wasn't even aware I was like in this pattern. And so when I sat with that, I was like, I am wanting to be rescued to validate that I am worthy of being rescued. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
my life is worth of like, oh, this person needs a place to stay. Oh my gosh, this just fell apart. How could this happen to her? Like she has all these bad things happen to her. And it was validating that I am worthy enough that somebody else cares about me. It's very deep. This is very deep. And
Yeah.
so I've been, sitting with that and working through that. But that pattern can play out in so many different areas. Obviously in my life, and maybe the listeners can see where that pattern may shape their life too. But it's very insidious. It's not going to be like in your face. It's not going to be a red stop sign. Sometimes it is, but these different things show up in our lives, and it's like, oh, It is trying to vet like that aspect of me that, from a young child didn't receive the love and the care and the admiration that she needed when she was a little girl. She's now seeking that as an adult woman. And so that's where the work begins of like
Mm.
giving that inner aspect of me the love from myself, not external.
Well, that makes sense because, I do know actually some people who seem to be thriving when some other people are helping them, and they don't tend to move out of a situation and waiting for this rescuing arm coming from outside. So maybe there is a reason. I mean, I don't know their life deeply enough, but yeah, there is this high that we can get. Oh, I'm important, I'm loved. People are rescue me, so I exist. And this is one way of existing, right?
And when that high is continuously chased, you're gonna like
Hmm.
the situations get more and more severe because
All right.
you're continuing to chase external love. It could be in romantic partnership, it could be in friendships, it could be in so
Mhm.
many different situations. But when that framework of like I am bad, I'm not worthy of love, what situations have you set up in your life that you might not be aware of, but maybe this conversation will spark a little bit of a flame and like, oh, that's where that's showing up in my life. I need to come back home to myself, give me love, because as long as we chase love externally, we are, self-abandoning ourselves and we're continuing to validate that shame. And I will also say this, like shame thrives in silence. And shame really can, if, I have, I'm a, childhood sexual abuse survivor, thriver. I don't like the word survivor necessarily. And so, when a person has gone through that type of abuse, shame really can thrive. It really takes a hold off of, when you're abuse, when you have like that type, really any abuse, but really the sexual abuse can be very difficult for people. Like you feel broken, you feel damaged. And so shame is just like, I am bad, I am worthless, and all of those, misaligned constructs. But there is always, not but, and there is always hope that you can heal it. Because I'm doing it. And so I know you can too.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing this little snippet. And it's important because nowadays it is quite common to grow up in a situation, whatever the situation, we feel that we have to make conclusions, but these conclusions are not the truth. It's a belief. And this is how we start moving the pendulum into another direction. And how do we get out of this system, which is a belief system, isn't it? How do we move and start to create this life that we want to have without stopping ourselves all the time with our outdated beliefs that, oh, it was all my fault, I brought it to myself, look at me, I'm just such a failure. If I hadn't done that, my dad would have never done this, and in all these conclusions that are totally wrong. So what's the way out?
The first step is awareness. We cannot make any changes. We can't even make a choice if we are not aware of what we are doing. And so I kind of have this ABC model. And so we have to change the awareness around our environment, around our belief system, and really question it. And then it's the belief. What is my belief? Okay, I am bad. I am worthless. I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. Okay, have that, like even write this down of like, oh, I'm writing down these beliefs I have about myself, about the world, about other people. And then the third step is choice. And this is all a process. It, necessarily doesn't, some of this it happens instantly, but it really takes dedicated work to really change these deeply conditioned. And so I want to make a distinction, like these are just deeply conditioned beliefs that are absolutely like reprogrammable. Say that word fast. And so you can reprogram yourself to a belief with how you want your life to go. And that is a conscious choice. So for example, every time I hear this voice, like, you're not good enough, they didn't choose you, he didn't pick you, he chose someone else, you stop that and make a choice. And you can do this through a couple of different ways. One, you can make that voice into like a character from like a TV show that has like a funny voice. So like, Winnie the Pooh or Daphne Duck or like whatever funny character, like a cartoon character, have them say that saying, that phrase in that voice. That can work. For me, that doesn't really work. For me, I like to interrupt that pattern with thinking of something different in that moment. So I think of a flower. I love nature. My background is in ultra trail running. I run in mountains for many miles, and I love nature. And so I immediately interrupt that pattern, because all this is just it's a pattern interrupt. That belief is just it's a pattern that it's been so deeply conditioned that it has never had a stop sign. And so that stop sign could be just a simple pattern interrupt by what is right in front of me: tree, snow, a flower. And that is the very beginning of changing these deeply conditioned beliefs to something you want in your life.
Yes, we use that in NLP as well to change it completely, because the brain cannot really focus on two things at the same time with the same energy, and the energy will go where the focus is. So if we are like really thinking, oh, I'm bad, okay, let's get another intrusive thought inside that says something different, whatever. It could be an object, it could be like just going out for a walk quickly, and just shake it off, look outside. It's so helpful actually to move out of a house sometimes and just move into a different environment. And then you get the attention diverted to something else. Once we keep stopping this pattern happening, then those synapses that are very, very strong, they tend to become weaker. So it's not as automatic anymore, isn't it? And this understanding that the voice is not our voice. And I call that in all my podcasts the negative committee, the one that is always spitting judgments. And I always say to the negative committee sitting in our minds, spitting judgments, sit down and shut up. Because they had to stop quacking about, because it is not who we are. And I always believe that we are created for a purpose. We have a purpose in life, we have a huge potential. But if we spend our time putting ourselves down, we will be clouded. We won't see this potential because we think we can do it, but everyone else can. So how come? It's sometimes this voice. And so our worth is something we have from the day we are born. It's not because we've done something or we earn so much. We just have this inner worth. So you told me something about the inner child. Tell me more.
Yes, I was actually taking some notes so I could talk about some more topics. So we'll talk about the inner child. I really want to touch on like energy and frequency. And if anybody is familiar with the Hawkins scale, and so if you look on the Hawkins scale, you can like Google it, but it's this image of all these different like core emotions, and shame is on the very bottom of this frequency scale, and then it's guilt, fear, sadness, and like at the top of this frequency scale is abundance, love, joy, greatness, things of that nature. And so shame is at the very bottom. And so I have lived there. There's, of course, this is no judgment, and I am moving my way up to the top. And so it's a frequency thing. And I really want people to realize, oh, the shame is thriving in this very low frequency. And so if I want to, bring in abundance or the love of my life or money or, the fancy car, like whatever, people have their, mental constructs around, it is literally a frequency. And so energy work, I will say, is another tool to really shift some of these beliefs, especially if they're deeply conditioned. Energy work has really benefited me. And then the second thing, to your point, is inner child healing. And I like the multidimensional energetic child healing, because these parts, these aspects, internal family systems, there's a lot of different inner child work out there and different methods, which are, fabulous. But it's really connecting with those younger aspects of ourselves. At one time, we used to be 6. At one time, we used to be 4. And now we're in this adult body. And it's really, this is all kind of like internal work. So when I hear that voice, it's like the 6-year-old back maybe in that situation. And it's literally going to them. And one of the things, like I'll offer this tool for listeners' consideration. If you're a woman, growing up, we were not allowed to have like stuffed animals. That was like forbidden. Stuffed animals were sinful and all these things. And so what I did, I bought myself a organic teddy bear I guess it was last year. And that teddy bear kind of represents the younger version of me who never got that teddy bear. And I hold that teddy bear. It comforts, kind of comforts me at night, but it also comforts that 6-year old, that 4-year old, that little girl who didn't get the love that she needed at that time. And so it can be tangible. And a lot of this work is very like internal, like, kind of mental stuff. And, if there's really deep, trauma in your history, working with a qualified coach or, professional is highly recommended for this. And so, really connecting with that younger version of yourself. There's the self abandonment version of yourself. There's the little girl, the little boy who didn't get the love and the care, and that, maybe they bullied you in school, or maybe somebody told you, that you're never going to be smart enough. And you took that on as an identity. And that's not your identity. Because you exist, you are love. And so you are, absolutely, like, your worth is not from anybody, anything that was said to you negatively and even positively, to really hold even the positive things kind of in check of like, uh, Ruiz, four laws of agreements, take nothing personally. And it's really interesting when you kind of move into that evolution of like, not even taking a positive comment, personally, of just like, I am. And it takes it can take a while to kind of get there, but really healing that inner aspect of us who didn't get the love and the attention. And what do they need at this time? Do they need a hug? And it's like literally mentally picturing they're in a safe place and like going to them all, mentally, visually, and giving them a hug. It could also be, physical things that you do of like, yeah, buying the teddy bear and like, here's the teddy bear that you always wanted. Here's the baby doll. Here's, maybe getting a massage, like, here's physical touch, asking a friend for a hug, and really connecting with that inner child on a very deep level. Another tool that I use all the time is writing to that younger aspect from the higher self perspective of like, here we are today, because they might be stuck in that 6-year-old pattern. They might not even know that, oh, I'm here in this, like, I'm living in this location. I'm, having this amazing life. And so catching those different aspects and growing them up to where you are today can be very helpful of healing the inner child.
So this inner child can be helped. So we can go to a psychologist, psychotherapist, hypnotherapist, whatever we think is going to fit our case. I'm not here to tell you where to go, but it's something important because it needs to heal. And I remember there was a quite famous French illustrator, is a lady that's now working for Disney actually. Can't remember her name, but she made some 10 years ago a very good illustration where there is this little girl or boy, and he or she sees this monster, big monster hovering and very aggressive, and the child is very scared. But then the child looks better and it starts listening to this monster, and the monster, through different segment of this cartoon, becomes smaller and smaller. And then the child realizes that the monster is his past self, full of negative emotion. And eventually the monster looks like the child, but smaller. And the two, I think they merge together. And then there's like a little heart. I'm going to have to find a cartoon because I remember asking her, say, can I use your cartoon? It's so good. Such a beautiful illustration, full of light, because sometimes our biggest fears come from when we were a child and we see them as a monster. It can show up as a panic attack, anxiety, emetophobia, all sorts of things. We don't know what it is, but once you work on that, instead of avoiding processing this painful emotion, then we are feeling freer and lighter. And that's where sometimes when there is trauma, we want to work with a trauma specialist, maybe somatic therapist. One of the things that I know, that I don't know if you use those, but anything like movement, dancing, probably that's why you like so much running. So getting ourselves outside in contact with nature, touching the ground, breathing, and also exercise brings endorphins, which are 100 times more powerful than morphine. And so isn't there so much around us that we can do to start lightening up our burden? And if we can't do it on our own, there are therapists in there. For you, this worked very well. And what would you suggest to a person that in this moment is feeling this big weight and they want to get started, but they're not really sure, how do I work with this inner child? I don't know what to do. What's the first step?
Yeah, I mean, the first step is obviously awareness, and to even
Right.
pat yourself on the back that you are willing to take the step of like, oh, I haven't connected with my younger self. I'm not even aware of it. The fact that like now you are, and so give yourself a big pat, like literally, physically pat yourself on both shoulders. Give yourself maybe like a butterfly hug. Give yourself that dopamine hit of a win, because the brain likes dopamine. It's why we do what we do. And so when you acknowledge yourself, I just had a win here. It's going to elevate your life. And so that's the first step. The second step is what feels accessible to you today. If you've had a lot of trauma, it can be very overwhelming. So that's why I always, kind of recommend working with a guided. I'm more on the holistic side of a professional.
Mm.
I've done all of the modalities out there. Like my trauma is quite extensive. So I have done pages of healing work on this. And, let's say, I want to, let the listeners know that healing doesn't have to be expensive. And I know a lot of like these programs are, hundreds, thousands of dollars. Healing can be free. There's nature. You can go for a walk. You can buy, you can take a piece of paper and a pen. It's relatively inexpensive and just start writing. But really, and so I want to offer that. Like, you don't have to, like, I don't have the money. Okay, great. It will come. If it's meant to be. Start with what you can today, and like really, acknowledge that win of like, oh, I need to connect with my inner child. Where can I start? Maybe it's a letter. Maybe it's just like, even to yourself of like, today I heard this podcast and I realized I haven't healed that aspect. I haven't connected with you, and I'm so sorry. I'm going to do from now on, you have my trust, you have my commitment that I'm going to heal and grow you up to the, the woman or the man I am today. And so that's a really good place to start. Another place is, you probably have some, spiritual, ethereal type spiritual music that you can simply just like close your eyes and hopefully maybe in a quiet space, just let your body move. Like very somatic. How does your body want to move? When it wants to move, you move with the music. If it doesn't want to move, you stand there. And sometimes if the trauma is really deep, you might feel stiff, or maybe, just everybody's at a different stage. Some people are like, I love to dance. I love to move. It feels good. It can be very simple. Breathe. If you go to my Instagram, I have a couple of videos on how to reprogram your nervous system through very simple breathing exercises. Again, free of charge. And that can be a really good way to start to access that inner child. And it's just layer by layer. You don't have to, and I guess the point is that we want to dissolve all of these misaligned conditioning scripts in our psyche that are not where we want to go. And so, acknowledge yourself for the win, journal, get out into nature, frequency music, and just kind of let your body move to the music. And breath work, really 5 free tips that you can start today to start the process of like connecting and healing that inner child. And then there's obviously many more modalities through specific inner child work. Jen Peters has a great multidimensional inner child work. Internal family systems, IFS, is another modality as well. So those are 2 that I have used. Recommend.
That's an extensive list, so there is a lot that we can do, and we can get started today, which is the whole purpose of doing the whole podcast. I don't give you things you can do in 20 years. I give you things you can do today with amazing guests like Hope Rose. So thank you so much for being with us, for sharing all this wisdom.
You're welcome. Yeah. If anybody has any questions, go to my website, Hope Rose Speaks. I coach on this stuff as well, and happy to help anybody, get started. I can, point you to resources that you're looking for. If you have questions, happy to connect with you. This work does not have to be done alone. And you can break free from shame when we share it with others. And that is how you get your life back on track and live the life that you were created for.
Yes, we were created for an abundant life, whatever that means in your own country and your own family. And we can do it. We can do so much work now. So thank you so much for being with us, Hope Rose. Hope everything goes well in your life. And I hope that you guys want to listen, maybe share this episode with somebody who seems to have a problem there, or maybe just for you, your own healing. So may you have an amazing day thinking about how you can create a life you want by removing all the shame and self judgment and embrace life with more self compassion and kindness. Thank you so much, and I'll see you all next week. Bye bye. I need to cut it so I know where to cut it because I see the pink. Hey everyone, we're so excited to let you know what's going to happen on the 16th of May. We're going to have an amazing episode with Hope Rose. There she is. Say hello.
Hello, everyone. I think it's May 18th.
Ah, yeah, May 18th. See, did I do that wrong? I just can't believe it. It's
Do you want
May
to record
18th.
it? Do you
Yeah.
want to?
Yeah. And May 18, you will be out and about and all famous on my Facebook page, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, whatever else exists in the world. You're going to be there. And you're going to be talking about something very important. Do you want to summarize what it is?
We are going to be talking about shame. And shame is I am bad. Guilt is I did something bad. And you might not realize where shame is showing up in your life. So I highly recommend on May 18th that you bookmark that date to watch this podcast that's going to be coming out, and how shame is showing up in your life and how you can heal shame so that way you can live an amazing life.
Right? And that's all we want. We want to live an amazing life. So why do we carry this burden? We keep running faster and faster, carrying all this trauma from when we were younger. Maybe we had horrible step parent. Maybe we were abused. Maybe school was terrible. Maybe we were bullied. It doesn't matter what it is. But if it's holding us back and we are just closing and setting boundaries that nobody can approach us, yeah, what's going on there? There is a lot of shame sometimes, and Hope will be talking about all the types of shame. There isn't just one type, but are lots of them. So I'm, really hoping you guys come back to Facebook to see all the links. But remember just to go to iTunes and look for Create with Franz. And then meanwhile, you can go to the website of Hope Rose, which is what's the complete name of your website?
HopeRoseSpeaks.com. And Hope Rose Speaks on Instagram.
Easy. So I'll see you all soon. Take care. Bye.